Welcome, nutritionradio.org listeners. This is Lonnie Lowry, a university nutrition professor of over 20 years and podcast host of long-running shows like Iron Radio. Come on in. Trends in Science.
Hey, everybody. Well, we have a concerning episode today. This is partly from listener Dave Fryers in the UK. This also sort of validates something that we were talking about not long ago in episode 42 about artificial sweeteners. This time, sucralose is, well, again, really under the gun, and we're going to explore a little bit of breaking science and a new WHO, World Health Organization guideline that sort of suggests, not to use artificial sweeteners. So let's get into it. Let's start with Dave's email here. He says, "Hi, Lonnie, loving your output. I recently noticed an article about sucralose on WebMD, citing an article in Journal of Toxicology and Environmental Health Part B. It reveals health concerns about the sugar substitute sucralose, sold under the brand name Splenda, of course, used as an ingredient in all kinds of foods and beverages. In fact, side note, I had made a pretty wholesale switch to these yellow packets of sweetener, right, the Splenda, away from the blue packets, right, the Equal, the aspartame, and I had just overconsumed those in Diet Pops throughout the decades when I was younger, like in college. So I thought, why not something like sucralose? The molecule looks a lot like sucrose, right? It's a sort of looks like a glucose and a fructose stuck together, just like the disaccharide sucrose, table sugar, but it replaces some of the little alcohol groups on the molecule with chlorine. And that does seem weird. But it looks like, as I'm reading this material, it's sort of the metabolites of sucralose that, are the most concerning. Anyway, back to Dave's piece here. Researchers have talked about linking sucralose to leaky gut syndrome. They found that eating sucralose results in the body producing a substance called sucralose 6-acetate. And again, the new study is now showing that this is genotoxic. It damages DNA. Well, that sounds pretty scary. Here's a quote for you from Susan Schiffman at North Carolina State University, and I'll go to this original study in just a moment here. "It's time to revisit the safety and regulatory status of sucralose because the evidence is mounting that it carries significant risks. If nothing else, I encourage people to avoid products containing sucralose." Well, that's pretty brutal, especially for something that's so broadly on the market and the FDA has told us is safe. From the information that Dave sent, and he did cite it, it says the FDA reviewed more than 110 studies designed to identify possible toxic effects, including studies on the reproductive and nervous systems, carcinogenicity, and metabolism. And again, according to their website. Now, I do want to offer a side note. If you go back and listen to our original piece related to this, episode 42 on Nutrition Radio here, we did mention some consumer watchdog websites that kind of threw a little bit of concern at the early stages of FDA approval of this stuff, partly related to diabetes. But in any case, let's look at the WHO documents themselves. I went and pulled them, and then we're going to look at this paper as well from that Journal of Toxicology and Environmental Health. So if we look at this directly, use of non-sugar sweeteners, WHO guideline, and this is straight from them. This is the www.who.int publication. Let's take a look here. Overview. This guideline provides evidence-informed guidance on the use of non-sugar sweeteners to reduce the risk of unhealthy weight gain and diet-related non-communicable diseases in adults and children. The guidelines intended for a wide audience involved in the development, design, and implementation of policies and programs in nutrition and public health. So, if we take a look at this now, WHO advises not to use non-sugar sweeteners for weight control in newly released guideline. This is from May of this year. The WHO has released a new guideline on non-sugar sweeteners, which recommends against the use of NSS, right, non-sugar sweeteners, to control body weight or reduce the risk of non-communicable diseases. The recommendation is based on the findings of a systematic review of the available evidence suggesting that the use of NSS does not confer any long-term benefit on reducing body fat in adults or children. Well, my goodness, I mean, that felt like that was the point, right, of drinking Diet Pepsi for me all those years. I've tried to get away from that because of the caramel color and everything as well, but I still have one occasionally. I can't tell you the last time I drank a Sugar Bomb cola with something like 40, 50, 60 grams of sugar in it. Because I'm consuming usually something sweetened with either aspartame or sucralose. It says results of the review also suggest there may be potential undesirable effects from long-term use of NSS, such as increased risk of type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and mortality in adults. Replacing free sugars with NSS does not help with weight control in the long term. People need to consider other ways to reduce free sugar intake. And they talk about, natural source sugars. You don't want the added sugar kinds of, highly processed foods and that kind of thing. It says NSS are not essential dietary factors and have no nutritional value. People should reduce the sweeteners of the diet altogether, starting early in life to improve their health. That is brutal, and this is something that I touched on back in episode 42. I've been hearing from people in the industry that this is coming. Think about the impact this is going to have across all of these different kinds of low-sugar products. If we look at a Medscape commentary on this, WHO advises against non-sugar sweeteners for weight control. They point out that this new guideline really addresses a whole bunch of sweeteners, aspartame, ACE-K, saccharin, sucralose, stevia, and stevia derivatives. Well, what does that really leave you to be able to do? They say the recommendation is based on the findings of, again, systematic review, 283 studies in adult, children's, pregnant women, mixed populations, suggesting that these NSSs don't confer any long-term benefit. So, yeah, you're going to get commentary like this from all over the web, I think. It does present a challenge for reducing sugar consumption. I don't think Americans are going to just stop wanting very sweet things. It's not like when I was in Japan, you could get unsweetened green tea at all of these vending machines. I don't see that selling here. I just don't. So we're heading into a very curious situation. The Medline piece does specifically focus on the concept that this recommendation applies to all people except those with pre-existing diabetes, and that, again, it includes all synthetic and naturally occurring or modified non-nutritive sweeteners. So that's the WHO mushroom cloud, I think, that's been dropped just late spring of this year, and everybody's talking about. Let's look at this pile on, though, this paper that was sent in by Dave, or, pointed to by Dave. Toxicological and pharmacokinetic properties of sucralose 6-acetate and its parent, sucralose. This is in vitro screening assays. This is by Schiffman and colleagues. It's May of 2023. It's spanking new. Here's kind of the point. Sucralose 6-acetate is an intermediate and impurity in the manufacture of sucralose. And it says recent commercial sucralose samples were found to contain up to 0.67% sucralose 6-acetate. Studies in rodent models find that this sucralose 6-acetate is also present in fecal samples with levels up to 10% relative to sucralose, itself, which suggests that sucralose is also acetylated in the intestines. This makes me wonder if the focus on sucralose in the beginning just overlooked this idea that it gets metabolized to something, and then that is what's so damaging. This paper says that the testing they did indicated that the sucralose 6-acetate is genotoxic. The mechanism of action was classified as clastogenic, that is, producing DNA strand breakage. They go on to say that the amount of sucralose 6-acetate in a single daily sucralose-sweetened drink might far exceed the threshold of toxicological concern for this genotoxicity of 0.15 micrograms per person per day. So again, this is like a pile-on thing, after the WHO is already telling us that these artificial sweeteners in a kind of a broad way are not helpful and probably hurtful. Now we've got these additional health concerns, or at least underlining some of the already, existing concerns. This also goes on to say sucralose 6-acetate inhibits two members of the cytochrome P450 family, including CYP1A2. That's one of the enzyme systems that breaks down caffeine in the body. So I wonder when I put sucralose, if I put even just my half a pack of Splenda that I've done for years in my coffee, does that leave the caffeine in my system longer? These interactions are just kind of, mind-blowing. So I just want to bring this news to everybody. You're going to have to decide what you want to do with artificial sweeteners, and especially with Splenda. This was my, shining hope for a few years after the whole equal and aspartame, issues and that and overconsumption of that. I'm just trying to spread out and not overexpose to any one thing. I don't see any bans coming. I don't see this stuff being pulled off the shelves except slowly over time from product developers. But yeah, there it is for you. Some more concerns about artificial sweeteners. I'm going to try to, move away from them a little bit more. If you rely on them a lot, maybe try what I did and just move down to half a packet of the Splenda, or maybe go with stevia. I still have to think that that's probably a little bit less of a concern than some of these others. But we've already gone over on time, which is why we're moving to a longer format in Season 2. We'll try that for the rest of this year with some co-hosts. We already had a nice response from people who were willing to pitch in and be a co-host. So look for that coming soon. This is going to be the last week of daily output. Again, then moving to once per week in Season 2. We'll see you later.
The NutritionRadio.org podcast is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, check with your physician, nutritionist, or qualified exercise physiologist in order to make the progress that you need.